Freedom with Steve Ryan. Fired up freedom. All right. Do you ever look for certain services or products and it's just hard to find and you want to know if someone else has used that before? Well, visit my resources page, steveryan.com/resources, steveryan.com/resources. All right, so today we're talking about how do you handle other people's energy. Again, welcome everyone. We're doing how do you handle other people's energy. This is going to be a great conversation. I have some great notes for you, and then I would love to hear some of your input, whether you have questions or suggestions or want to share some of your tips. All right, so we're going to get this rocking and rolling. So if you're on Twitter, just hit the request and I'll bring you up as soon as I'm done making some points. If you're on the Clubhouse side, just raise your hand and I'll bring you up as well. For those of you on TikTok, I may read your comments toward the end, depending on how much time we have. We do keep this at an hour at the most, or we can end early if we have no shares or limited shares. All right, so how do you handle other people's energy? This is super, super, super important. Now, why is this important? Because energy impacts the way we think. It impacts the way we process and the way that we make decisions. All of these type of topics, they all relate. So whether we're talking about income opportunities or whether we're talking about mindset or whatever the subject is, how you handle energy is a super important thing. What is energy? It could be someone's tone. It could be someone's actions towards you. It could be the way someone makes you feel when they say a certain thing or when they do a certain thing. All of those things are important. Now, for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking about how do you handle other people's energy. We are on multiple places and multiple platforms right now. Now, the two places that you can speak is going to be Twitter Spaces or Clubhouse. If you're right now seeing this live video stream, just go to steveryan.com/spaces and that'll take you to Twitter Spaces. Now, if you prefer Clubhouse, then you can get to that link from our Discord. All right, cool. So let me keep rocking and rolling with this. I just explained why is it important to talk about this topic. And as soon as I finish explaining this, for those who want to come up and contribute to the conversation, just hit that request. I do see requests on Twitter Space side, on the Clubhouse side. Just raise your hand and I'll bring you up in just a bit. All right, so as usual, I wrote some notes before I see those who see live. You see these notes I wrote. So I put a lot of thought into these topics that we're talking about because it's important. All right. So energy, again, I'm just going to start here again. It impacts the way we think, the way we process, the way we make decisions. That can impact your in the moment decision making. It can also impact your long-term actions. Now, I've been loving to make points in threes and come up with these acronyms. How do you want your energy to be? Now, this is going to sound grammatically incorrect. I know we have a teacher in the room, Mr. Craig. So this is definitely going to be grammatically incorrect. But you know what? Who cares? How do you want your energy to be? B-E-E. You get it? So these are the 3 points. Being honest. B is for being honest. The first E is for expectations. And the last E is for everything is about perspective. So BEE. BEE is the acronym for how I'm going to talk about some ways that you can handle other people's energy. Being honest, expectations, and everything is about perspective. So I'm going to hone in on these 3 points. The first one, being honest. Now, there's 2 dynamics to being honest. And that's being honest with yourself, first and foremost, and being honest with others. All right. What's being honest with yourself? That could be acknowledging how energy makes you feel. It could be acknowledging how someone is making you feel when they say a certain thing or do a certain thing. Maybe you want to think about, why are you feeling that way? Is it from past childhood trauma? Is it from maybe a relationship that you've had with a love relationship or family relationship or even friendship or even business relationships? You can acknowledge how it makes you feel. The reason this is important is that when we don't acknowledge how people are making us feel and be honest with ourselves, it can become difficult to come up with solutions for helping your energy. It can be difficult for knowing how to handle your energy or even other people's energy. Now, I've struggled with this sometimes because the way that I get personally, when I'm focused and I'm focused on what I'm doing, sometimes I don't like to deal with things in that moment. So if a certain energy comes toward me a certain way, I may not process right away. I may just, but that's my process. For you, it may work differently. Everyone's different, and that's okay. But being honest with who you are, that's okay. For me, if it's something that's overly, traumatic, like I've had, family member murdered and other losses. For me, sometimes I can't process that in the moment. I may address it or share it or talk about it, but it's a more complicated process. It took me 3 years to process my dad's death. And in my brother being murdered, I haven't even fully processed that. Like, I know it exists, but then a part of me pretend it doesn't. But that's my process. I process in layers over time. I write about it. I talk about it here and there. For you, it may be different. Some people have to process right away. That's okay. Understanding who you are as a person. Are you someone who processes things right away? Or do you need time? That's important. Because when people try to force you to deal with things when you're not ready, or force you to do things the way that they think you should do things, that's going against your energy flow, So that's just my take on that. Also, the second part of being honest is being honest with others. Now, this doesn't mean you have to verbalize it in that moment, but what it means is being honest with how it makes you feel. If someone's making you feel a certain way, it really depends on your dynamic. If it's a total stranger, do you just not care and be like, whatever, and let it go? If it's someone who's close to you, do you address it? What about that saying when it says pick and choose your battles? Do you want to address every single thing? See, these are questions for yourself. I don't have the answers to that because it's going to depend on your personality. For me personally, it depends on what I'm going through and what I'm doing in that moment. You know what I mean? I'm jumping ahead about perspective, so I will be mentioning this again on that last E about perspective, but it really truly is about perspective. Where you're at, what you're doing, those things make a difference. All right? But being honest with others means like, do you want to set those boundaries? Or do you want to just let it go? Or do you want to get to a point where you do address something? Those are things. Being honest with yourself and with others, that's crucial. All right. Now, I'm moving on to the next point, which is setting expectations. Do you have expectations of others? Do you have expectations on how other people should treat you? Because if you have expectations on how other people should treat you, that can impact your response. Like, let's say you have someone close to you and you were expecting them to, you had a certain expectations for them and they didn't do it. They didn't follow through. They fell short. How are you going to respond? Are you going to respond in a negative way, a positive way? It depends on what it is. You know what I mean? I try to show up without expectations. Now, I'm human. Sometimes it does creep in. You know what I mean? But when it does creep in, I've made a habit of looking at myself first and say, okay, why am I expecting this from this person? So what I tend to do is I show up for myself first. That's what, just like right now in this space, it doesn't, like right now, there's hardly anybody on the Clubhouse side, but there's some people on the Twitter side, and then there's some people in the live streams. I show up ready to deliver this message regardless of who's here. If there was 0 people here right now, I would still be talking about what I'm talking about right now. You want to know why? Because I'm showing up for myself first. How am I showing up for myself first? Because my gut instincts and my spirit says this message needs to be out in the world. And I know that regardless of who is here live, I know I'm going to push this message out to a lot of people. I know that more people will hear this audio. More people will see this video. I will push this out there. It will be on my podcast. It will be on my YouTube, on my Twitch. It will be in all these different places. So I know that regardless of who is here right now, this message is going to get out because my gut instinct says, Steve, this message needs to be heard in the world. It doesn't matter who enjoys this topic in this moment. Somebody out there needs to hear this right now and in the future. That's why when I show up, I don't care about the numbers. I know some people said we should, but I don't because it's irrelevant. If I go push this and 10,000 people see this and hear this, it's going to be irrelevant that 30 people was here right now. Seriously. So it's all about expectations. So for anyone who's just now joining, we're talking about how to handle other people's energy. I like to recap because people may hear this at different points of times. And so I came up with the acronym BEE, just like a B, which is being honest with yourself, expectations, and then everything is about perspective. Now, I've talked about being honest. I've talked about expectations, and now I'm going to talk about everything is about perspective. And then I will open up the floor for anyone who wants to come and contribute, respond, share their insight. I love hearing other people's shares. It will be awesome. Just hit the join request, and whether you're on Clubhouse or whether you're on Twitter Spaces, we'll do it in the order. I usually will call out, okay, this person is up next. This person is up next. All right, so everything is about perspective. Here's what I wrote in my notes. I said, releasing energy when we need to. When does it really matter? So if someone is doing something to you and making you feel a certain way, you have to ask yourself in that moment, does it matter to address that in that moment? Does it matter? That question is really up to you. There's not a right or wrong answer to it. You see what I'm saying? I can tell you for me personally, most things don't matter to me because it's all about perspective. You see what I'm saying? Having close family members, one get murdered and one died, that really changed some of my perspectives. It really made me really change the barometer of what actually gets me riled up. Most things don't get me riled up. And really before then, it didn't either. Except for if I see someone I care about being attacked, things like that gets me. But now it's all about perspective. You have to ask yourself, is it really worth your energy being riled up if someone attacks you? You see what I'm saying? Sometimes, do you want to respond? And if you do respond, what I practice is a technique of keeping myself balanced. So when I'm responding to someone, I really make a focused effort to try to take my emotions out of it. Now, it doesn't always work. I can tell you that right now. It does not always work, but it has really helped me with not allowing anger and frustration to come into my energy because of someone else's energy. It's really pushed it down heavily. I would say probably 80-90%, you know? Like, for example, yesterday, I was on the phone with my cell phone company and, they made a mistake on my account. And the guy I was talking to on the phone, he got upset because I asked for a supervisor. I said, sir, I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful, but this information is not consistent with what you guys have told me before. Can I speak to a supervisor? He proceeded to try to argue with me on the phone because I wanted to speak to a supervisor. He was like, well, I can help you. I said, well, the way that you can help me is by doing A, B, and C. And if you can't, then I need to talk to someone who has the authority to. Now, he cut off my account. He cut off my account, and I know in my gut it was on purpose. He cut off my account. So my phone line went dead immediately. Now, what I do is I have two different types of phone accounts. I have one on business and one on personal, and different lines on both. So I proceeded to grab my personal phone off my personal account, and I called the phone company. I stayed calm. I said, you know what? I'm not going to let this get to me. So I ended up talking to a supervisor. They gave me like a $200 credit for the inconvenience, and then they proceeded to fix my problem. But the thing is, I could have took the path of being upset. But in my mind, it's like, yes, it was inconvenience and it was a slight frustration. But what is the point of being like, oh my God, I can't believe my phone is cut off. What am I going to do? I'm just like, you know what? It's all good. It's going to be resolved. And so I chose the path of staying calm. Because had I got upset and, let's say, raise my blood pressure and get all upset, that would not have changed the fact that my phone was turned off on purpose. And it would not have changed the fact that I still had to talk to someone else to get it resolved. Would it have been fair for me to take my anger out on the new person on the phone who had nothing to do with it? I'm using an example because all of us experience different things in our lives, and we can make a choice as to how we're going to let those energies impact us. I like to keep a clear head because that helps with strategy and figuring out solutions for the problem, you know? So let's see what else. So that's a technique that I do. And then I'll open up the floor for anyone who wants to contribute to the conversation. But what I do is I keep myself calm. I ask myself, does it really matter? And I ask myself, if I'm upset and I display being upset, is that going to change things? Now, again, we're human and we're going to have our moments. I have my moments, but I really try to not let my upsetness come from a place of emotional upset. Oh my God, what are you doing? Now, I will do energy when I'm excited, like, let's go, we're fired up, let's go. All right. But these are my points. I'm going to open up the floor for those who want to come up. I know we had a request on the Twitter side. That person got rugged. Welcome y'all on the Clubhouse side. Welcome y'all on TikTok. Hey, Sapasa, Ruth, Star, Knight, Merca. Welcome all of you. Bicky Dobb, welcome. Well, if y'all have anything you want to contribute or ask, just leave it in the comments and I'll bring it up. All right. I see some people in the room on Twitter. So we see BB, Abundant Lion, Artisan, Reigning Insight, Craig Bossman, Raptor Ruse. I see Ann God. I see Nevnet. I see Trash Panda. Welcome. I see Nancy. I see VR. So welcome, welcome, welcome. If anyone wants to come up, that will be great if you want to contribute. If not, we will wrap it up. Fired Up Freedom will be right back after these messages. Do you ever look for certain services or products and it's just hard to find and you want to know if someone else has used that before? Well, visit my resources page, steveryan.com/resources, steveryan.com/resources. Yeah, there we go. Hey, Artisan. Welcome up, Artisan. There we go. Hey, Artisan, how's it going?
Oh, it is absolutely stunningly beautiful. It's early in the morning here where I am, and it's starting my day. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. I thoroughly will concur with what you had shared with everyone. Like for me, I've just really given up like expectations. Because if you think about an expectation, you know, it's either implied or it's voiced out loud. And a lot of times expectations people hold are those that are not stated. You know, like I expect you to be home by 4:00, you know, for the kids or something. But if you don't say that, then it just creates discord in our lives because we get frustrated and angry and can, you know, just start arguments and stuff, or it can start to erode your own self-esteem in some cases. So I think expectations is something that I kind of left, dropped it at the doorstep a long time ago. You know, it just is, I refrain from doing them. If I recognize that I do, just like you had said, I look at myself. why? Why do I have this feeling? Why is this this result is what I'm expecting from someone else? They can't read my mind, so yeah, I agree with that. And thank you for sharing. It was very enlightening, and I'm glad to hear that there are others that work towards this goal. So thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And you're so right. It does come to expectations, because sometimes expectations, when they're not spoken, it's almost as if people subconsciously expect others to read their mind. And then, so when we think about it, it's almost like, if someone don't know if someone don't know that you're expecting something, and then you get mad at them for not fulfilling actions, is that really rational? But it happens all the time. It happens all the time. You know, for those of you who are just joining us, we're on multiple platforms right now. We're on Twitter Spaces, we're on Clubhouse, we're on TikTok, we're on some other live video platforms. We've been talking about how do you let other people's energy impact you? And I went over some key points, and this is just to bring everyone up to speed. We just had Artisan speak, but I went over key points, which was BEE, like a bee, being honest, expectations, and everything is about perspective. Now, for those of you who came in after I went over all those points, still feel free to come in and share, how do you handle other people's energy? Or if you've heard what we've gone over so far, maybe you have a response to that. Or maybe you want to ask a certain question or whatever. But just send a request, and we'll just go in order on the platforms. And whenever we're done with the requests, I'll just wrap up the rooms. But in the meantime, I'll chat with Artisan some more. So Artisan, how do you handle other people's energy? Like, that comes toward you? Like, do you have any techniques that you use that you would like to recommend?
Well, it depends on, again, what type of energy is coming. Like, is it like when you had expressed, oh yeah, let's go, and you're all fired up, that that could sometimes also be disruptive if someone is very, like, practicing silence, for instance, or meditating, and all of a sudden you just cram yourself in somebody's room and it's like, wow, excuse me. So there can, that's just like the opposing side. But for me, I just really don't give permission. Okay, I don't give permission, like, for myself. Like you said, when you were making up that phone call and you had to take care of that business, and there was like an injustice. Those things, it's like in my personal life, it's like, no, I'm not going to allow somebody to, screw with my energy, get me upset. We're human, right? It can happen. We can all get triggered, but then I look at, why am I being triggered? What is the message behind it? Like, I have a thing, like, in my own personality self, I don't care for injustice when other people are being, like, severe injustices. That I just can't, I don't tolerate well. Sometimes I could voice something in a specific manner. If, like, say we were at a restaurant and somebody, like, was being extremely rude to a server, something like that, they're having a bad day, or they didn't get the food the way they liked it, people will tend to take that anger or frustration out on everyone else. And so what they're doing is just spreading discord. And I think that, sometimes it's just like, hey, I'm sorry, or you're standing at a store and you're bringing something back, and somebody's, standing behind the desk and they're screaming at someone. It's like, really? Is that frustration and anger really warranted at this person that had nothing to do with that box delivery that you got? You got to choose these things sometimes. And like you had said, it's like, definitely question it. What is it? what's happening. These are the things, but you have to think about it. You have to be aware of it, or you have to be aware of the energy that each of us is putting out there. But for me, I remove permissions. I in my own personal life, it's like, no, okay, you're having a bad day. I can give you space. So that's something like a technique that I do if my child comes, here to the house or something and they're upset or whatever. It's just, okay, let me give you a little space for a moment, catch your breath, and then we could talk. So when we look at resonating, like either being empathic. Now, sympathy, there's 3 runs of them. You have sympathy, empathy, and compassion. And compassion is at a higher octave. Sympathy kind of recognizes that there is a limitation. I just don't believe there's limitations. That's our perception. We are not limited only by our thoughts, our positions, and our perceptions. So therefore, I don't choose to play into that. So that's another way that I help stabilize energies for myself and those around me. Did that make sense, Steve? It's like, because sympathy is a recognition of a limitation. Empathy is energy borrowed. Okay, you're borrowing somebody else's mood or energy for that time being. But compassion is one where you can listen, you can be compassionate about what's going on, but it's not ruining your day. It's not, triggering you specifically and taking you off your own foundation. So those are a few things that I do in my own personal life to handle other people's energies.
Wow. I love the permission piece. You're not giving permission. I love that. Don't give permission to allow someone else's energy to impact you. Wow. Couldn't have said it better. That was great. Wow. You got some hearts on Clubhouse too, Artisan. So, all right. Welcome up, Trash Panda. Hey, Trash Panda.
Hi, good morning. I know it's a kind of funny name. So I want to thank you both for sharing. I think that I'm a little bit newer to the game of empath. Like, it's not that I'm a skeptic, but I have some very spiritual friends, where I've always been like, kind of at bay, where I'm like, I respect your spirituality, and I don't know if I necessarily could dive deep, but over the course of the last, I'd probably say about 4 to 5 years, after them kind of drilling into me, both of them, they keep using that word, like, Megan, you're an empath, like, you call me at particular times when you feel my energy, or there's certain things or ways I guess, like, even with them, they're like, I know you felt that, and I'm like, yeah, I can feel it. So it's kind of interesting. And just to kind of piggyback off of Artisan, like, I really appreciate that comment. And I've always been a person that unfortunately has had a lot of trauma. And one of my questions is, do you think people that are, identify with being empathic, do you think they're more susceptible to traumas, or, because they are so compassionate? Artisan mentioned, like, that compassion empath. So that was going to be one of my questions, because unfortunately I've had quite a bit of trauma in my life, and after several successful years of counseling, I've built boundaries. That's huge for me. And when she was speaking about, like, permission, it was interesting because I was thinking about my space. So, for example, it's not like I'm shut down. I don't invite people into my space, but I never had an expectation when they get into my space, like my home, or, just like my personal sanctuary. And over the course of several years, I've taught, the people I love, like, my space does need to be respected. And I do need a calm energy, because at the end of the day, when you leave, I'm still here, and I need that energy to be good, positive. And I've made that healthy boundary, with love. And I've explained that to family members or, my friends, anyone who's come into my space. So I guess it was kind of like a two-part commentary. But I just wanted to ask that question about, do you think empaths do tend to have, like, more trauma, or, like, are they susceptible? So that was just something that was kind of on my mind.
That is a very, very, very great question. I don't publicly say a lot that I'm an empath, but I'm very empathic. I've been that way since I've been a kid, and it's made me very, I'm going to use the word sensitive, not sensitive in a reactionary way, but sensitive in a picking up type of way to what's going on around me. Rather someone is in my presence, or rather is their voice over something, or rather it's just like a sensing that can't be explained logically. And that can seem a little spooky to some people until they hear me respond certain ways. And it's like, wait a minute, I didn't tell you what was going on. What is this? But to answer your question, for me personally, I have two answers to that question. One, I feel like it depends on the person's personality. And this is just my opinion. What are their environmental factors? Who are they as a person? It's so many layers. That's why for me as an empath, when it comes to traumatic things, I tend to withdraw, and I tend to use an outlet through, like, either music creation or writing, or I just let it sit, even if I'm not analyzing it. Because I know that for myself, I can be very intense, and kind of similar to what Artisan just mentioned about if something was silent and I come in, hey, it's about being aware. I feel like for those who are not as aware that they're empathic, I personally feel that they have a harder time, because they start to confuse other people's, how other people are feeling with how they're feeling. I had to learn that myself, because sometimes, like, for example, if my mom or someone was angry, I found myself angry, and it got to a point, I'm like, why am I angry? Like, what am I really upset at? Like, what? And when I couldn't identify why I'm upset, I'm like, oh, she was upset. That's her stuff, not mine. So I feel like the one of the steps is being aware. If you're empathic, you're someone who's empathic. You may not even know you're empathic. I didn't know I was empathic until, like, I was an adult. And when I look back at situations and how I responded, and I had a talk with other people who were empathic, they described some things. I'm like, wait a minute, I'm empathic too. This is why. So being aware is the first step. So if someone is empathic and they're not aware, they're going to get drained a lot. And when they're tired of getting drained a lot, I find that it leads them down a road of getting answers of why am I feeling drained? Why is this stuff, in affecting me? So to answer your question, I know that was a long way to answer it, but I feel like it all comes down to awareness. If someone is aware that they're empathic and they admit that to themselves, like being honest with themselves, then that's going to be like the first step to knowing how can they develop something that works for them to handle situations, since it's going to be different person to person. But if someone is not aware that they're empathic, I feel it's going to be tougher, because even if they don't use the word empathic, let's even take away empathic. Knowing yourself, knowing what gets you riled up, knowing what pushes your buttons, knowing what are your traumas, what are your triggers, so self-discovery, whether someone identifies as empathic or not, I feel like that's going to be the key. And one other point, I feel like everybody's empathic to a degree. They're just not aware of it. Because think about, we have music, we have the news, we have media, we have movies, we have all this advertising and branding. And And companies look for ways to get responses from people. They put out certain energy waves. That's just my take on it. But I see Artisan wants to chime in. Hey, Artisan.
Yeah, when you take a look at, because you had kind of specifically asked about like trauma, and can trauma be borrowed? Like with being empathic, okay, or again, it's energy, vitality that is borrowed. So if someone is having, let's say, a very traumatic day, as an example, all right, you're in school, I don't care if it's high school or college or whatever, and there's a teacher, and the teacher presents something, and it triggers someone, that it's rah-rah, sis kumbaya, and we can't stand this, and we don't like it, and whatever, and so therefore, there becomes a vibrational energy where other people will say, well, I feel the same way. And because there could be one person in that group that had a horrific, traumatic experience, say with a teacher, then they can all vibrate within a lower frequency. So again, empathy is technically energy, vitality, which is being borrowed. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily yours. And like what Steve was saying, recognizing where your trigger points are, because you could also be the person that was traumatized and you are sending that energy out and other people will pick up on it. If you think about it, how do riots start? Right? There's a few people, they all get together, they all have that same energy around a symbolic idea, like rah-rah, sis kumbaya, this is horrible, and we're going to do something about it. But then somebody comes in with anger and triggers everybody else, and it's the ripple effect, and then guess what? Now we've got burning down buildings and breaking glass and, just some horrific stuff going on. Do you know that if there was even just a couple of people that were in that group that could send that beautiful, calm energy out, it could detract and bring down a riot? But very few people know or are strong enough to do so. So again, empathy, that part, is being vitality or energy borrowed. It's like what Steve said. It really is recognizing what somebody else's triggers are for myself in my own personal life, so that I am not constantly bombarded by everyone else. I mean, there's places, come on, think about going to Walmart, like, wow, ow, that hurts. The energy's like, I'm sorry, Walmart, but really, it's very low energy. So I know if I have to go into one of those stores like that, I use that as an example, don't everybody hate on me now, but I definitely recognize that there's people in there that their life situations can be some horrific stuff and they're just trying to get through the day. So what I will do is I envision a bubble around me, my aura, okay, whether it's 8 feet or 20 or 100 or, 20 miles. That is my energy. That is what I have created within my bubble, okay, my little egg, if you will. And I only allow love, light, courage, compassion to enter. Period. If somebody does not match that energy, then guess what? There's where the boundary is. That is, I do not exchange the other energy. I stay focused and grounded within that little bubble. And guess what? That's my bubble. Everybody else can have the rest of the cosmos for their energy. Pick it. What would you like? What would you like in your energy? And so this is another mechanism that can help us from being triggered, like being in a mob, okay, or a riot. So I'm just saying recognize that, is that the energy that you truly choose to borrow from someone? When I go into Walmart, absolutely not. I don't care for any of the energy that is there. So therefore, I'm not gonna suck it up. It's like, can you walk into a smoke-filled room and come out smelling like a rose? I'll let Steve answer that one. So, it's like, yeah, no. So you get to choose your energy. This is the point. We get to choose that every moment of the day. How
Absolutely.
would you like to live?
Wow. And Trash Panda, you had a response to Artisan, or did that answer your question as well?
Actually, yeah. I have, and I apologize for so many questions. I'm kind of, once again, like learning about this, kind of new to this, and I'm definitely intrigued. I guess my follow-up question is, do you think, I mean, I know that you mentioned, like, Steve, that you feel like there is a certain amount of empath that everyone shares. I guess my question is can it, like, I if you feel like you have like a higher, I don't know, like you feel like you are a bit more empathic, do you think that's also hereditary? For example, my late sister, I feel like she also was one. There was no words necessarily to describe it. And unfortunately, she went down the path of abusing drugs. And there's a part of me that wonders if, like, like it was a coping mechanism. Because again, it would be very odd. Like we would not talk for quite some time, and I did have boundaries because of the fact that she was, addicted, an addict. However, when she would, and there was always like an open, I told her all the time, whenever she needed to talk to me to let me know, but there was a clear communication. Like, I'm like, I know that you're still doing this, just please don't do that or have that behavior around me. And when she would communicate with me, it'd be weird at weird times in my life, when I really needed someone. And, reflecting back on her, like, I feel like she had that capability too. And there's a part of me that wonders if that was maybe her destruction, I'm sorry, I don't mean to get so heavy in the morning. But so I guess my follow-up question is, do you think it's also hereditary? Like, do you think, because I personally feel like she was one, and Stevie mentioned the awareness factor, and she wasn't aware, and she did carry everything on her back per se, and she felt like it'd be interesting if I got around her and I was happy, she'd be happy. If I was down, I noticed before I even got around her, she was down. It was like she could feel my energy. And so, I don't know if that's necessarily like a sisterly bond or, if it's a little bit more than that, because I noticed that, like, she would be like that. Somewhat, like, before someone called her, her energy would change. She would pick up the phone and it kind of like reflected on that energy. And I would observe that and notice that. So do you think there's like a hereditary aspect to it? Like, so for example, does anyone have like any siblings or parents that also exhibit like the same kind of, I guess, like features?
I personally think yes, that it is hereditary, because as you were talking about your sister, and may she rest in peace, I was thinking about one of my brothers, and it was similar to what you just stated. Like, he would just pick up on things before, you know what I mean? Like, let's say if my mom was upset, and I happened to be around him, like, I would notice his mood change too. So I feel like what you're saying, now that I look back at it, I think some of it is hereditary. I do. Now that I'm listening to what you're saying. And people not being aware of how being empathic can impact them, and not being aware that they're empathic at all, and not being aware that they're picking up on other people's energy and allowing that to impact them, that can really lead to to self-trauma, you know, like you mentioned, you know, drug usage and things like that. It can lead to that. And that's why this topic, I've loved this discussion that we've had the past 40 minutes, because it is for people who listen to it back or see the live video playback. It is going to really, really help them, because what you just brought up is super, super important. So yes, I do feel like it's hereditary. I really do. I feel like that's one piece of it. But I also personally feel, and this is just my opinion, who knows if this is right or wrong, but I feel like all humans have it to a degree, because we're all energetic creatures. You know, that's really my true belief. But I believe the super empathic side, like you just described, that may be hereditary, and some of it may be learned from environment. Who knows if those are the only answers, you know? So, but I feel like that's why it all goes back down to being aware and being honest with yourself. Because if people are taking these, I call them energy journals. I didn't know what this stuff was. I've been doing it for years, but I didn't know what it was. I would just write down different thoughts and feelings. But if people did like these energy journals, like, and it doesn't have to be every single day, but if you notice that there's any kind of intense energy, like something that made you really happy or really sad or really traumatized, make a note of it so that you'll remember it. If you're not a writer, do a voice notes. I do voice notes all the time. And that way you can go back and discover, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't discover I was an empath until I was in my 20s. And that's when I looked back and I learned, and people were telling me what it meant to be an empath and what it is. And when I looked back and I looked at different situations, I was able to see that I fall into that category. You know, so that's my response to that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you so much for your awesome questions. Really appreciate that too. Fired Up Freedom will be right back after these messages. Do you ever look for certain services or products and it's just hard to find, and you want to know if someone else has used that before? Well, visit my resources page, steveryan.com/resources, steveryan.com/resources. And before we go to Khalid, I'm looking in the chat on the Clubhouse side, and we got Nancy. Nancy says, good morning. She says, I'll repeat that phrase when expectations start pulling me down. She says, 2 of my 3 kids are empaths. Wow. So, and we got Samuel. Welcome, Samuel. He says this is so important to him. Yes, Samuel, we did some talking earlier today. And just to recap, the way that I've been starting off these rooms and spaces and live streams is I'll put some thought into the topic. I'll take some notes. I think about my experiences. I think about things that I've learned. If it's something from a certain book, I'll share the title. If it's just something from my experience, I'll share that. And today, the acronym BEE came into my head when it comes to energy. B stands for being honest, and that's being honest with yourself and being honest with others. E is for expectations. And if I had to add something to expectations, and I have to give credit to Artisan for this, it would be expectations and permissions. Are you giving permission to other people's energy to impact you? And the third E was everything is about perspective. You know that saying, the glass is half full, the glass is half empty. It's all about perspective. If someone's coming at you a certain way energetically, could it be because they had trauma? Maybe they're feeling insecure. Maybe they're projecting. Or if we allow energy to impact us a certain way, and then we go and interact with other people, are we going to let that energy impact us? Like I'll go to something that happened, I don't know if it was this week or last week, where we were talking about a subject and someone came up on the space, and one of the first things she said was, I'm more advanced than you, so and I've been listening to what you're saying, and I think you know what you're talking about. But the point that she made that statement, I'm more advanced than you, when she don't know me, I don't know her, she's a total stranger, wasn't in the room that long. I could have chose the path of responding negatively in the middle of everything and said, what do you mean? But I'm so confident in myself, and it didn't matter that I said, you know what? maybe she is having her own issues of confidence and need validation and needed to speak that out loud to make herself feel better. So I didn't entertain it. I let her say what she was going to say and I moved the conversation along. Because at the end of the day, that would have impacted the room. That would have impacted everyone's energy. So I felt I had to protect the room and the live stream and not let that energy impact in that moment, and just move it along. But at the end of the day, I'm human. I know I don't know everything. I'm always open to learning. The things that I do know, I feel I'm confident to know that I know them well, but I know that I don't know everything and I'm always willing to learn. So that's why a statement like that didn't bother me. I was able to release that in that moment. So, yeah. We have about 9 minutes left. I know Khalid came up, Willow came up. We have some other people that came into the Clubhouse side and on the the TikTok live stream, and the other streams. I just want to, before we get the last couple of shares, we are going to end at the top of the hour. So I don't want anyone to feel interrupted at the end of the day. But let me share with you what's happening tomorrow. On tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how to expand your brand without burning out. I know a lot of times we had marketing and branding and creating income and things like that, but how do you expand your brand without burning out? A brand isn't just about people who are trying to sell something. Your brand is your reputation. Your brand is the awareness. Maybe you have a certain cause you want people to be aware of. Maybe you have something you're working on or whatever. But sometimes it can be so overwhelming knowing what to do that we burn ourselves out. So that's what we're going to talk about. And earlier this week, these are some of the topics we went over earlier this week. I'll be quick about this one. I just had it up and here we go. So Monday, we talked about creating opportunities in your industry. Tuesday, we talked about how do you know when and how to set boundaries. Wednesday, we talked about, which was yesterday, how does your self-language impact your mindset? The languaging that you use. The languaging that you use for yourself. Today, we talked about how do you handle other people's energy? And tomorrow, we're going to be talking about how can you expand your brand without burning out? Now, a couple of you made a suggestion, and I think this is going to be a topic soon, maybe Monday, we'll see. I'll get it together for next week. But how to do marketing and branding when you don't have a budget? How do you, if you have something you're trying to do, and I have a ton of ideas, that's a whole session by itself. So I think that may be a Monday topic. But anyway, we'll say hello to Khalid and Willow, see if you want to chime in. Now, keep in mind, in 7 minutes, I am going to do a hard stop, just letting y'all know ahead of time so you don't feel interrupted. Hey, Khalid, welcome up. Oh, we can't hear you. If you want to leave out and come back in, we'll come right back to you. Oh, there you go. Yes, we can hear you now.
Hi, Steve, and hi, Abdessin, and hi to everybody in your room. Yes, buddy, I want to ask about this question, very important. Everybody in this world look for freedom. So my question is, the category and classification of people. We are a human being, and so empathic, and passionate and neutral. Which best way? This is my question. Which best status for you as a human being to not engage with bad energies is to be super neutral or just empathic or compassion with people without engage with their bad energy? This is my question. I hope that you got me, Steve.
Yes.
I am talking. I am from Jordan, so my English a little bit weak. Thank you.
Oh, it's okay, no problem. I'll chime in quickly, and then I see Willow wants to respond as well. I feel like with that question, I hate to say, I'm not trying to sound vague, but it really depends on the situation, the circumstances, the relationship you have with the person that's giving you the energy. Is it a stranger or is it someone close to you? Is it family? I can tell you what I personally do. I personally imagine myself at a beach by water. And all this happens real quick in my mind because I've gotten so accustomed to doing this technique. But I center myself and I quickly make a very quick decision and ask myself, does it matter in that moment? You know what I mean? Like, does it matter? Like, it's a very, very quick decision. If it falls into the category of not mattering, I just pretty much release it. But we are human. We are human. So if I get to the point where I let something really get to me and I respond in a way that I normally wouldn't, I immediately acknowledge it to myself. Does it warrant an apology to someone? Does it warrant an apology to myself? Does it warrant whatever? It all depends, but I feel like it all boils down to honesty and awareness and perspective. So, and I know Willow had a response as well.
Yeah, hey, first of all, hey, Steve. Sorry I've been such a stranger. I had to take a break, so I'm excited for your upcoming space about how to maintain without burning out, because I definitely burned out hardcore, but we can talk more about that later. But hey, Khalid, I love your question. And also, Shadow Fox here has taught me a lot about this, about kind of how to set boundaries energetically with other people's energy, because especially in some of these, you know, I was connecting with so many people in Twitter Spaces that it just got to be kind of overwhelming. I couldn't really control or handle or manage how much of other people's energy was just flowing through me, you know, and it just got to be so overwhelming and heavy that it really it overcame me, you know, and I just couldn't. So I had to kind of step away. But I think there's something to be said for having convictions and for speaking up, for like having a voice in situations that warrant kind of, you know, having a voice for the voiceless, or for people who can't or who have been silenced, you know. So there's something to be said for that. But I think too, there's something to be said for knowing that when people come from different perspectives that may be kind of traumatic energetically, that really we can send them compassion, because that's their stuff, you know, that's theirs, and you don't have to take that on, right? Just reminding yourself, like, I forgive myself for the judgment that is mine, because that's not mine, that's theirs, you know, and I don't have to carry that. And I can have compassion for someone who feels that way, even though, because, you know, who knows what they've experienced that's led them to kind of have whatever kind of aggression or you know, opinions that might be harmful to other people. But I think we can set boundaries, and these, you know, I don't know why I just said Frank. Steve does a really good job of setting boundaries in these spaces and making it a safe space for people to come and make sure that, you know, no one is being harmed. And I do think that that's kind of a role that is underestimated or not talked about when it comes to hosting spaces, that it's important to kind of make sure that you're maintaining that. And that takes a lot of energy from people who are hosting the spaces themselves. You know, it takes a lot more energy than people realize, you know, to kind of hold space for other people in that way. But yeah, I think if we kind of set those standards, then lead by example and others will follow.
Wow. Thank you so much for that, Willow. And no worries, never worry about apologizing, because you take the break that you need, you take the energy space that you need. It's perfectly okay.
And for myself at times I can't describe the words I try, the fear